if we're the customer champion as well, it's then going, well, okay, why would a customer give us data in the first place? But importantly, if they did, what would we do with it? And if we were going to do something with it, how does it make their experience better? How could we learn from it? And what's the reasoning?
Hello everyone and welcome back to Identity Architects, the InfoSum podcast that spotlights the leaders in the media industry shaping the future of data-driven advertising. I'm your host Ben Cicchetti, and this week I had the opportunity to sit down with Rob Goodwin, Chief Data Officer at MSQ and Chief Executive Officer at MSQ Data. Together, Rob and I discussed the modern media agency, data strategies, composable technologies, AI, being a customer champion, and much, much more. Before we jump into that conversation, this is a reminder to hit that subscribe button to be alerted when new episodes of Identity Architects land. But without any further delay, here's my chat with Rob. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Rob Goodwin, Chief Data Officer at MSQ. Rob, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Ben. Brilliant to be here.
I'm excited to dig in a little bit more to MSQ and your role there. But for anyone who's unfamiliar, can you just give us a quick introduction to yourself and MSQ?
Yeah, 100%. So I'm Rob. I'm the Chief Data Officer of MSQ globally. So look after roughly about 9 to 10 different agencies across the group. They look after all sorts of stuff from brand planning through to creative design to data analytics, insight, through to research, intelligence, technology enablement, and many, many more things, end-to-end of marketing. But I specifically then look after, and also the CEO of MSQ Data, and talking about data, technology, and insight.
Amazing. Well, we've definitely got a lot to cover off then, so I'm super excited to dig into it. We'll start the way we always do, though, which is to get to know you a little bit better through a series of quick-fire questions, starting with what's your earliest memory of advertising?
I love this one, Ben, as well. So when we got into it, I was thinking, oh my God, what was the earliest moment? And quite cheesily, it was the Argos and Index catalogue when I was a kid, getting used to circling the presence I kind of wanted, think about the advertising in there, and just absolutely love a little bit of DM. I still enjoy a bit of direct marketing in the mailbox. I find it quite special. But alongside that, probably a couple of killer TV ads when I was younger, probably tells the age. But I remember the Renault Clio ads. The Nicole and Papa in the Renault Clio going through the French countrysides, just because I think it went on, and it just absolutely bugged me, as well as You've Been Tangoed ads. I don't know if you remember that one, but big orange man, and I think it got banned eventually, but those two really stepped out for very different ends of the spectrum, but a good bit of DM.
Yeah, I love that. I love Argos catalog's a classic, and it's a shame it doesn't exist anymore. But it's a classic.
Exactly.
So if you take yourself back to those commercials, back to the Argos catalog, circling the gifts you wanted from your parents, what did you want to be when you were younger, when you were growing up?
Interestingly, and I thought, right, should I say the truth or should I give something a bit more inspiring? So I've gone for the truth as a setup. What I wanted to be was a Pizza Hut delivery man, because I wanted loads of free pizza as a kid. So that's when I was really little. I thought, my God, they get all that free pizza. They can eat it on their journey to drop it off. But obviously, as I've grown up, I didn't become a Pizza Hut delivery guy. So I didn't quite meet that dream. But it is once I got into technology, data, lots of that at university, I just went, I definitely want to become a subject matter expert in this field. Didn't know what field, didn't quite know what area, but once I started getting more into mathematics, I went, this is where my line of work is going to go, probably from the age of 12, 13. I was going, I'm going to be using these skills later in life.
Interesting. That's super fascinating. So what was your first job in then either marketing or advertising industry?
Yeah, so I partially did fall into it, but my first job was working for Bounty Packs, Bounty Mums. So anyone that's got parents out there, they would have come across Bounty. And they get little Bounty bags, so physical inserts and direct mail into these little bags for pregnant women going through all their stages. That was a weird world to get absorbed into as a young lad, just to understand that world. But it's all about data broking, understanding data, understanding audiences. That really got me into that. And then shifted quite quickly from there into B Sky B and went into some hardcore work for a company called Data IQ as part of B Sky B. And it was all about below the line and above the line optimization, understanding audiences, looking at marketing effectiveness And this was so many years ago. Absolutely excellent system set up and incredible.
So what do you think it was that drew you into the industry? Was it the data? Was it the mathematics side of things? What was it that drew you in?
Well, it was a mixture of all of those things. I think the truth is I fell into the marketing and advertising industry. So I knew nothing about it, even at university. I didn't really think of it as a career path. I was thinking probably I was going to fall into banking because I did a maths and statistics degree and parents from the banking world. So I was thinking, well, I'm probably going to go into that or actuarial science kind of areas. But I came out of university and just found a job Googling, searching all sorts of things, going, actually, there seems to be significant amounts of data analytics. There wasn't really, data scientists weren't a thing then, but you kind of go into the analytics world and go, right, well, that sounds quite interesting. There was a job close to home. I thought, right, let's have that. Went for it, got it, and just kind of fell in and started learning about it. So it wasn't deliberate, but I managed to find a way in somehow.
And what do you think it is that keeps you in it? What keeps you excited about the industry?
I mean, and I am glad I fell into it, to be honest, because I think I might have got a little bit bored purely being in the banking derivative side. So, and that's because I loved a bit of the creativity as well. I studied art as well and psychology, sociology. So loved the audience understanding, the people and the business sense. So that's kind of what keeps me in it, is the advancements in technology, the ability actually now being agency side rather than client side. I've done a bit of both, but to understand different business challenges. And that's what keeps me in it. It's so just stretching my mind, stretching the understanding of how those things work, keeps me sharp. So it's all that strategic thinking, technology and business challenges.
So when you, in your role, obviously today, you must get to meet a lot of people at different stages of their career, some just kind of fresh coming in to into our industry. What advice would you give to someone who's just starting out in their career in media and advertising?
Oh my God, it's a tough one, isn't it? There's so many different fields to go into, and I've heard some really good people talk about this, so much better than myself. But my play, based on my experience, is purely about just focus on becoming a subject matter expert in at least one core vertical and build out to two, maybe three verticals. So you've got something to always fall back on, but grind away at becoming that subject matter expert. Don't worry about some of those annoying, mundane tasks. It's about understanding them, why we're doing them, making them better or removing them later on. But if you can become a subject matter expert in one of those core fields, it's then scaling out from that. So get a core vertical, then you can go across the capability later on. But also, with that in mind, is always communicate and talk to the broader teams outside of your verticals. So if you're in data, talk to creative, talk to strategy, talk to finance, talk to the actual workforce at the client side, like who's at the Salesforce end of this, understand how that business tree works. All that's going to do is just try and optimize your subject matter expert area. But later on, that's then where you can grow, become better leaders, better drivers, better optimization as well. So probably the best advice I can give at this moment in time.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And I think that's really, really useful for anyone that's listening to this. And I guess speaking of subject matter experts, let's put it to the test a little bit. Oof. How would you describe what you do within media and advertising to a 10-year-old?
Not easy, Ben. I try to explain it to my parents as well, what I actually do. I'm still in just marketing and advertising. It's probably the simplest way of explaining it. I give it a go. So I help big businesses try to understand what people want to buy, what their interests are, and how and when you should talk to them with the best content. That is probably the most simplistic way I can talk about it without getting into data modeling, analytics, all the tech jargon that makes it absolutely confusing for people.
Yeah, maybe wait for them to be 11 before you kind of drop off.
I guess. Exactly. Scare them a little bit, yeah.
100%. So a two-part question. What keeps you awake at night? And then what gets you up in the morning? What gets you motivated and inspired?
Big question. So awake at night, I suppose for me, it's about where to put the effort, where's the time. Becoming a leader in the field, it's kind of going, how do I find the balance between spending time on the business in the long term, developing a clear vision for the team so we've got the right stability to drive us moving forward. And then it's all about just delivering that the high quality output from the team. So making sure we are keeping not only the teams happy, but our clients happy. So that is probably the biggest headache of going, how do we drive growth? How do we drive the business? How do you think about that long term whilst delivering high quality and brilliant output? And I do have a bit of a perfectionist kind of manner within the team, and we just try and keep that, it's that classic thing of you're only as good as your last project. So it's always going, we strive for the best, but it's then finding that, how do we do that whilst we're doing the growth as well? And then to your second part, Ben, it's then going, but then what inspires me is cheesily, it's actually my team, because they find that balance. They are constantly striving and pushing and like exceeding my expectations on the work that they deliver. And that's just really impressive. But it's also because I've got a big data and tech team as part of that, but it's the creative ideation they deliver as well, which I am so passionate about. I love that. And it's got to be beautiful insight. It's got to look attractive and be consumable. And I love to see these different ideas and inspirations from quite a diverse team to then figure out what that is. How do we make better experiences for the brand? So that's what inspires me, is what the teams come up with. Alongside, and one of the reasons why I'm in the field as well, is getting to work with loads of different businesses and understanding their challenges, and then how data, technology, and insight can help it. It gets the mind going. It really keeps your brain sharp, and you're just constantly learning.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's a great way to keep inspired, and also great things to have on your mind, I guess. If you've got to have something to keep you up at night, it's the right things probably to be keeping.
It's not, it could be a lot worse, right? So that's not too bad, and it's a good challenge to have.
Yeah, I agree. So the last of our quickfire questions, and a personal favorite of mine: if there was a song that was a soundtrack to your life, what would it be?
I talked to my wife about this one, Ben, and basically the names of those songs I can't probably put on a podcast, I'll be honest with you. So I can't call those out. But but when we did have a bit of a laugh about it, it's I actually picked, firstly because I actually really love the song, but Jamiroquai, Virtual Insanity. I don't know if anyone's picked that before. I love the song, but I was just thinking, oh my God, what I'm doing with the tech world, what we're doing with AI. And there's a brilliant line in there. I think it's like, useless twisting of our new technologies. Oh my God, if ever there's been a world of millions of technologies out there, how do we really use it? What's the real groundworks to do it? So I kind of go, actually, soundtrack to my work life today. Yeah, that's not too bad. I quite like that one.
I love that. And we have a playlist on Spotify that we add all these songs to. So we'll add that to it so everyone can enjoy it and read into the meaning behind it, which I think is awesome.
Brilliant.
So let's dig in a little bit deeper into you, MSQ, and kind of get your perspective on the current state of the industry. But I think it'd be helpful to set a little bit of context first. So can you give us an overview of MSQ, its structure, and what you guys do?
Yeah, 100%. I know we briefly mentioned it. So MSQ is roughly about 10 agencies global as part of setup. So we've got hub set up within the UK, APAC, USA, and Europe. So loads of different satellite offices in some of those areas as well, but we've got the kind of core hubs within those four kind of regions. 1,200 people globally, so it's potentially still one of those unknown independent agencies with private equity backing. And what we do look after, which is the best way I describe it, is literally the end-to-end of marketing. So we can build you the most gorgeous, stunning TV ads to do your advertising, just like we do, for instance, the AA, Very, for instance, the Pink Flamingos at Christmas, highly awarded campaigns, through to CRM, customer experience enablement, digital website builds, technology enablement, and data and insight to fuel all of this with marketing effectiveness measurement and the rest. As well as then PR and social and content delivery. We've got fantastic clients out in the market like Diageo and Unilever, where we do insights for, or we do some fantastic bar academy work, for instance, for Diageo. And then on top of it, we then split that kind of fairly evenly, 50-50 between B2B and B2C. So we've got like industry-leading B2B agencies like Stein IAS as part of our infrastructure as well. So as well as Elmwood looking at physical in-store design for product placements, as well as then brand design as well. So anything you can think of from the end-to-end of marketing, we can pretty much do, whether that's consultancy, change management, through to data, technology infrastructure audits, all the way through to CRM enablement, and then the rest. So What that means is that we've got a fairly complex agency and capability infrastructure, and actually quite a simplified organizational structure. So with those hubs, we always make sure we've got core teams within each of those hubs. They literally live and breathe and work together. They're all in the same office. And what we try and simplify for our clients is if you need multiple resources, it's fine. We just create a subject matter expert team, just like I was saying about becoming the verticals. Create a subject matter expert team to deliver whatever the client needs. And it might only be one thing, or it might be 5 or 10 of those things to do. And it's all about just delivering the best experience for our clients as part of that. On top of that, then I then run MSQ Data, which is then sits kind of in the center of MSQ and helps all the other different agencies. And we've got roughly about 65, 70 odd people within there that are more marketing technology, data and insight driven as well. So that's all about unlocking insights. It's about enabling better customer experiences. It's about looking at marketing effectiveness, analytics, building segmentations models, or implementing a customer data platform. So we work in a bit of a hub and spoke capability. We've got people in the core 4 regions, and then we kind of disperse the work out or have specialists in different areas. And also on top of that, we've got great partners where we can then tap into if we need, for instance, Adobe or Salesforce specialists, or we need technology support to enable Snowflake, CDP solutions, other pieces around that we can then pull on and create as part of the wider ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, that's fascinating. And obviously that truly is the end-to-end of the marketing strategy and the customer journey. So with that diverse range of goals, diverse range of agencies, and all the corresponding clients that go with them that you kind of need to please, how do you get the right data layers in place? And from a technology perspective, how do you ensure you have the right tech in place while remaining agnostic and effective, which I guess is the most important part.
$1 million question there, Ben.
Yeah.
I love that, and this is what actually clients come to us for, and they talk to us all the time, going, "Well, how do we solve for this?" or "What are some of those challenges?" And a lot of clients then have a lot of technical debt or historic challenges with understanding who owns the data, where it sits, and all those types of things. So, actually, as part of our team, and what keeps my mind sharp is going in there, running those audits. Where are you across the entire ecosystem? And figuring out, well, what's working, what isn't working, and what's the ideal state. Some of the big FTSE 100 or FTSE 500 companies, they will have a behemoth technology stacks and a huge amount of technical debts over 20, 30, 40 years that you've got to try and get through the maze. And then you've got more startups and newer businesses that have a bit more of a cleaner, smaller infrastructure, and then you can make a better composable ecosystem and architecture for the back of it. But what we start to do to get the right data layers in place is then go in and say, well, what are the business questions you need to answer and solve first? Because a lot of people go, oh, well, data and tech's terrible. But okay, it might well be. However, what do you need it for? What are you trying to answer? What's either the marketing solution? That's predominantly what we solve for, but it could be an operational solution or a creative solution. Or financial, a HR solution that you're solving for as well. So it's going in and going, what are those right business questions? And that just takes a little bit of thinking, a bit of a step back sometimes, going, right, we just want to fix this one thing. But actually you go, well, no, actually you need to think about the end-to-end, like you said, Ben, the customer experience. And therefore, what's the technology and the data to support that? What are we missing? Or what can we infer from some of that logic? So getting the right question is number one, and it really helps. It helps frame what we deliver and what the output's expected as well. What's the business case around it? And some of that could be around, for instance, just enhancing performance. And therefore you go, well, actually your data and tech isn't so bad. It's just your process and ways of working, or the people that need a bit of restructuring, need a bit of support in those areas as well. So it's not always the data and tech that comes into play. What I will say, though, Ben alluding to it, is when we get under that, we always make sure we look at people, process, data, and tech. And it's normally a mixture of all 4 of those things. They're normally not wrong, but it's kind of going, but on its own, it's only so good. If you fix the data and technology and don't have the right process and people, it's no good to you. It's that classic, lawnmower engine in a Ferrari kind of analogy, which you kind of go, well, if you haven't got the people to run it as well, it's just not going to drive itself. So it's about setting it up in the right way. When we then start to think about what we're delivering, it's then dependent on the challenges that we need to identify that the client has available. So, what is the challenge in the ecosystem, whether that's digital layers, whether that's customer data, for instance, financial data? What are those actual challenges, and what is trusted? Because you normally find it's the trusted data that's missing. So they might have data coming through, they don't have a single customer view, or they don't have a single source of the truth, which used to be, or they don't have an enabled ecosystem with the different data layers for engineering and setup. So you then go, but what is those missing data points? So how do we enrich their arsenal of insight? What do they have? What do they trust? What do they trust with 80% of the time, for instance? Is that good enough? Or does it need to be 100% of the time because it's about billing, for instance, for customers? So we try and understand those types of things within that data layer. And then that kind of leads us into then going, well, if there are some gaps and it's going to take 6-12 months to fix some of these things, what can be enriched with third-party insight? So what can we do quickly? How can we use partners, for instance, like yourself with InfoSum, to then enrich some of that third-party data or buy in data from other providers in the market and think about research and then that data signals to infuse it. But it's understanding what's the value and where's the quickest win. Do we need to collect more information from the customer in the right way as well? So that's where you get some really interesting questions around what is the right data layers in place. Because you go, it's not just about the boring SQL servers that can host it all. Yes, that's needed, and actually it's the building blocks for a lot of other things. But it's then, what is it? What's the question? What are we answering? What's trusted? What's not? If we're going to enrich it, what's the best tools? But then also, but why are we enriching it? And therefore, what do we need to capture from the customer, buy from third parties, enrich from third parties to then, or second party partnerships to then really maximize the value of client data? So that's kind of what we start to think about. And then from like a technology kind of view, similar kind of ecosystem, kind of the question setup. But this is where we have multiple different partnerships and trials to make sure we stay basically stay on the front foot. So we understand where and what is the best technology in play. So this is then thinking about who are the best players? What's the best technology ecosystem for our clients? So how do we keep it agnostic? And we do pride ourselves on being an agnostic business when it comes to technology. But therefore, you need a composable, interchangeable ecosystem. And that's kind of what we always try to design where possible. It's not always feasible, as I was saying. Some of these behemoth businesses have, fully embedded with Adobe or fully embedded with Salesforce ecosystem. So you maximize what that ecosystem can do. But actually, where we can then get it right for maybe smaller businesses or other areas, it's kind of going, what's a composable tech stack? How can we change things in and out? How can we use APIs as part of that infrastructure? And therefore, anything you then build in the future can constantly change, which obviously we will need with the AI revolution in a few more years' time and now to then make sure we've got composable technology stacks.
Yeah. That makes a ton of sense. And I love starting with the business question and the why. I think, especially from a data perspective and in the data-driven world we now live in, the temptation is just to collect as much data as possible. But often it's not about collecting the volume of data. It's about collecting the right data that you then have a purpose for using.
100%. People forget it. It's such a simple step, or clients will either refine scopes or get really focused on, we just need to fix this one thing. And that could be the solution. But unless you know what that bigger business case is, or what's it going to drive, or what's the usability of it, that's exactly it, Ben. It's one of those big challenges with trying to deliver the right output and the right deliverables.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the other thing that sometimes gets forgotten when we're talking about data and technology is the people and the teams behind it, the people that then have to work with those technologies, the people that have to use that data. So how do you create a structure of teams to enable this? And you touched on how MSQ do it. I'd love to understand a bit more about how MSQ do it, and what's been your experience with clients from that perspective as well.
So, I mean, spot on. Then it's you've got to have the people, you've got to have the teams internally and client side from my side as well. Got to make sure we've got multidiscipline subject matter experts to solve for this, because one person, and this is partly the challenge of hiring in our field, data and technology, is going, just because you've got one type of analyst doesn't mean they can do every type of analytics. It's understanding what an engineer is versus an architect versus a data scientist versus an analyst. And so for non-experts outside the field, it's going, well, I've got this one person, they can solve it all. And go, no, some MarTech expert on a CRM solution could be very different from a customer data platform versus media marketing analytics solutions. So it's finding the right people, but how we try to think about getting the right people behind the solutions, technologies, and what we do internally and for our clients. So we do live and breathe what we preach most of the time as best as possible. But what we try and embed is an effectiveness culture. So we've got a real passion behind it. I've got a super passion about it, of going, what is effectiveness? How do we deliver marketing effectiveness? What's incremental uplift? Not just increased revenue, but what's the incremental uplift of doing what we do today? And that's what really matters. That's where pound and dollar impact comes into play. So that's where we embed effectiveness culture, training across all of our teams. And then as part of that, and we've aligned to the IPA effectiveness structure, but then it built on it, embedded much more detail across it, of going, there's kind of 4 pillars to think about. One is having a clear effectiveness vision, so your team vision, but also your campaign output. 2 is then going, what's the right people? So exactly to your point, if you don't have your people and teams behind it, it won't work. 3 is then the process. So what's your effectiveness process? That could be more about efficiency, but also effectiveness to make sure you've got the right key moments for deliverables. So that could just be taking a step back and going, what's our measurement framework? What's our dashboarding solution? And then 4 is obviously then having the data, tools, and insights to support it all. So we kind of embed that into all of our client scopes, into our team structure and design. And we do annual planning around this. Every 6 months we check in as well, but make sure for every single client project we've kind of got that process in play, making sure we've got very clear people, process, focus, vision, and then the tools to enable it. And they all have equal weighting. So it's not just going, just because we've got a subject matter expert in tech, that wins. It's all about having all 4 of those areas and pillars together. What's the measurable outputs? Why are we doing this? Bringing it always back to what's the experience we're trying to deliver, not what's the technology or data we're trying to implement. It's all about the outcomes, not just what we're building. So that kind of helps. And by doing that, you then go, well, what are the people that you need to do that? And that's where we generally will always have a blended team. It's not just one unicorn that can do all of this, which would be amazing, but it would just be exhausting, even if somebody can do it all. So it's then going, what's the blended team? So we always have generally about 3 or 4 people using different bits of time. And because everyone has different strengths and weaknesses, and the thing that I pride myself on and managers within the team is just to understand them. You don't expect everyone to be perfect or being able to be that unicorn. It's going, right, what are you strong in? Is it more organizational, operational setup? Is it more technical capabilities? Is it consulting and visualizing and talking about data? Brilliant. We can use all those skills, blend the teams together, and as a package, that's what we do is some of the output. And that's kind of how we then build our teams around it. So we'd always have data strategists, for instance, partnering with a technical or a data scientist. So it's never just if we need a model or segmentational build, you could just say, well, we get a couple of analysts on that to build it. But you kind of go, yes, and the output might get you 70% of the way there. But to get you 100% of the way there, we need a data strategist and a strategist to build the colourful storytelling, the narrative, and how it aligns better to marketing. So we always have a good blended team as part of that. And that's where we just go from project to project to make sure we've got that balance. And if we're missing technology capabilities, that's where we then work with either partners or some good data pools of people we've worked with, trusted partners, to then upskill or train some of the people in the group or pull them onto projects so that we can learn from them and embed as part of a wider ecosystem as well. And on top of that as well, just thinking back to your point around, and then how does some of our clients do this, or what their experience are with the right people? I think that's why clients come to us, because I think the clients struggle with stagnation in some places, or they've been stuck with, like I said, a lot of technology or data for a number of years, or they've been there for so many years they haven't seen what the best in class or what the ideal world could be, or they get torn down over the years of just going, oh my God, it just has to be this way. So that's the beauty of us coming outside in and going, what are the right people? What are our learnings? How do we then enrich their team and just embed some of our specialists to help train or give some different ideation to spark some innovation sometimes? And that's where, and with because we're agencies, we've got more exposure to different types of technology as well. So that's what we find with client teams is they've probably had a bit more historic, or they've had, or in some instances, they've done a change management change every 2 or 3 years, and they're just in a bit of a mess because of it. So we then get in there and go, right, how do we stabilize? How do we bring some innovation? How do we bring in good best-in-class experiences? And that's where you can see rejuvenation for client-side teams as well. So, and that's quite fun to do, and our teams just love it and just create some good friendships as well off the back of it.
I love that approach and that kind of people-first approach. And I guess speaking of people and a specific group of people, which is consumers, everyone obviously talks about first-party data versus third-party data, or cookies versus privacy. However, it feels like a lot of the time consumers still take a back seat in those discussions somehow, even though they're such a critical part of it and the value exchange. How do you and your clients communicate with consumers and offer the personalization that we know they desire and that they react better to, without crossing that, quote unquote, creepy line that we also know exists?
It's a skill, I tell you that, Ben, and we've got some fantastic creatives and strategists that really do come up with that brilliant copy lines and structure and decisioning. But there's a grey area there, and it's the balance of working really closely with the clients, seeing how happy they're to go with some of this stuff and setting up. But to do it, it's a great thing to talk about, because it's setting up the clients before you get talking to the customers and going, what we try and become is the customer champion. So what would the customer want? What's the best customer experience? Because that's the end goal. I like to think of data, tech, and insight as we're the powered engineers behind the scenes. So we're that hidden, the hidden special forces, for instance. But you've got the hero creative and customer experience, which is front of house, and that's really all customers care about. That is what they're either buying versus the 4Ps of marketing, but think about price, promotion, and the rest. That customer experience and getting that right, that's what customers care about, and that's why they come continuously back to our clients and businesses, whether that's B2B or B2C at the end of the day. So if we're the powerhouse behind the scenes and we're the engineers trying to perfect it with data technology, it's then going, well, what do we need? So if we're the customer champion as well, it's then going, well, okay, why would a customer give us data in the first place? But importantly, if they did, what would we do with it? And if we were going to do something with it, how does it make their experience better? How could we learn from it? And what's the reasoning? And as you'll know, with InfoSum, for instance, it's all about understanding that privacy balance, but also consumers are becoming so much more knowledgeable about their own value and their own first-party data. What are they doing with it? So the maturity of it, and we've seen it in YouGov surveys and everywhere else, the maturity of consumers is going completely upwards and always will do, especially with AI breaking into the world as well, to understand how that gets used. So the primary starting point then is going, well, what's the data value exchange? Why should I give my data? And we can do it as individuals. Why should I give my data to a business? Are you going to absolutely hound me with emails, text messages, phone calls? At which point, I'm not giving you anything. I can't bother with that. So you go, what's the value exchange? Do I get something as fair exchange and fair equality off the back of that? So am I going to just simply get a discount? Am I going to get free delivery? Am I going to get meet those kind of fundamental Maslow hierarchy of needs, base level of there's a minimum expectation. But that's not normally quite enough. It's sometimes that it get you instant sign up and a bit of information, but it's then going, what's that enhanced experience? What's the service? What's the emotional value that we can then deliver on top of that data value exchange to get the more interesting stuff, understand maybe aspirations, interests, names of pets, for instance, names of children, other things to make it a little bit more personalized, a little bit more relevant to gifting, dependent on the category. And this is where you've got to be really careful about the category you work in. If you're FMCG, for instance, or pharma, actually getting all of that level of personalization and micro information might not be as relevant back for the consumer, so therefore not needed. But if you're, for instance, a e-commerce business and you've got personalized products, actually knowing some of these individual personal points can be great, because you can then show them what the product could look like. You can bring it into life. So it's all about balancing up what that either digital experience is, what that personalized CRM recommendation, what that personalized offer recommendation could be, what the service layer can be. And every single brand has a place and an area for this. It's just how much they dial it up and dial it down. But if you don't get that value exchange right, no consumer is going to be bothered to give that data, and they're becoming much more clued up to that today. Or they provide it and then remove their permissions very quickly, at which point, under GDPR or ICO regulations, you're going to lose any permissions to actually use that data in the future. So wasted effort and very costly way of doing it. The other thing then is, which it kind of comes in play with the customer experience, it needs to be fast and seamless as well. So I've mentioned CDP or customer data platforms a few times, but it seems to be the future kind of core technology of just collecting data when consumers come to a brand's website. But it needs to be seamless. It needs to be fast. It needs to be engaging. It needs to be creative and visual in places, or very simplified and fast at checkout, for instance, in other areas. All depends on that moment in time and where they are in the process. But the technology behind the scenes and the number of questions you ask is critical. And that's where, depending on the clients and category they're in, we do lots of testing on smaller sample base, whether that's pre-going live or just live tests, beta, A/B, split pages within digital experiences, to understand where is the drop-off, where have we asked one too many questions, or how can we, and always ask this ourselves, how can we make this shorter? How can we just get the critical stuff we definitely do need? Because it will make our product better, or make our learnings better, so therefore we can make the customer experience better. Always comes back to that. And this is where sometimes you can get IT and tech and data teams and my guys behind the scenes forgetting that. So we always just got to make sure we've got a customer champion, we're bringing it back to the outcomes. And that is why we have that effectiveness kind of ways of working that we just talked about, because you've got to have the process, the people, and the focus, which is then either the business case, what's the customer experience focus, or what's the vision that we end up needing to do to. So therefore, even if it is something as mundane as just collecting more first-party data, why are we doing it? What's the questions around it? Does it add value to us? Does it add value to our product? Does it make the customer experience better? And then it's just the simple sense test. Is it annoying to do this ourselves? Because if it's annoying for us to do it, for us to download an app and it doesn't work, everyone's going to be annoyed. So therefore, we've got to just give it that personal test as well, and then market setup. There's also some fantastic tools out here now as well, and I suppose interestingly as well, going, is it is it cookies or not so cookieless world as well into the future as well, and thinking, well, what happens when those cookies do change, and it and actually you get the browsing data through, for instance, and does that change the privacy demand and what you can require? I haven't got the answer to that yet, but I know it's big in the news right now. But I personally don't think it massively matters, because actually the permission still comes back down to if you collect better first-party data, if you can then enrich it with third-party in a stable, privacy-led world, and the customer has their own capability to control what's being done with that data, and the businesses make better customer experiences, that's really what matters. And that's just the right thing for customers and for businesses to do in the future.
Yeah, I love that really thoughtful approach. And during that response, you dropped the magic word, which was other than cookies, which is AI.
Yeah.
And obviously, AI is quickly becoming an incredibly hot topic, appearing in conversations on podcasts and events. Today, how useful is AI actually, in your opinion? And what's your opinion on its use within the media industry?
Oh, great question. I mean, and by the time this goes out live, then I'm sure the world would have changed yet again. So always tough to say. So I always put a caveat on this one. But I think obviously there's been a massive boom. Right? Everyone knows that ChatGPT smashing it into the market. It's really just made it really front and center for everyone. But everything behind the scenes, I think. To your first point, is it useful? Yes, but is probably my start point there. Yes, it is useful. However, I don't think it's as good as it can be to completely replace everything right now. And I think that's where people are coming in, getting a bit nervous or getting really excited in places. I think what we're seeing now is it is helping speed and efficiency of output in the marketing and advertising industry, especially when it gets to specific areas. So engineering, it's really helping our existing teams with coding a bit faster or QAing and correcting code. Not to generate it itself, it could do, but we don't trust that. And this is where we kind of go, it's not quite good enough in certain places, or it's not quite trusted. But it really helped with the engineering side. It's also helping with creative setup. And of course, just like any other creative agency, we do huge amounts of scamping and ideation, creative ideation beforehand. So it is massively increased that. It's started to empower strategists rather than just the creatives to come up with ideas and make them visually look fantastic. And in fact, we did a brilliant workshop with the three mobile digital team and got them to scamp up the Olympics design costumes for different people and using a bit of AI, and used about three different providers to come up with different AI solutions. So it just shows it's a lot easier for non-technical experts to use the solution, get some ideas out, so get some creative ideation, and be a great starting block. So it is certainly speeding up and creating a bit of efficiency there. At the moment, I think it's more about that efficiency focus. It's not replacing end-to-end jobs, but it's about workflows, it's about efficiency of outputs in stages. What it does have the power to do, and I don't think we're quite there yet, is taking a step back and going, we're kind of going, what are the phases from A, B, C, D, E to output? And it can make efficiencies with a bit of tooling, bit of either human plus AI within those infrastructure. And it's doing an okay job in those places and solving for some of them, not all of them. And it's just speeding up increments, so we're getting gains. What it will eventually do, and prediction is then going, well, okay, instead of all of those different steps across it from A to E, how do you get from A to B? Take out those steps, and how does AI kind of support that replacement? And that's where I think the experimentation, the testing, the build out, and we need more from LLMs as well as visual AI solutions on top of this to then go, how do we improve that process moving forward and later? And I think we're a year or so away from some of those. There's some tools and some bigger businesses that are ahead in places, but realistically, I think most people are pretty much on parallel. They're testing, they're starting to embed and use it as part of their day-to-day planning, but I don't think it's completely replacing everything as yet. So we're on the cusp, I think, and I think we're still probably a good year or so out. even if we were ahead, it's then going, but our clients ahead and ready to enable, embed, and set up as well. And that's where you've got to think about legal permissions to use some of this solution, procurement to start thinking about it, and then the structure of their teams to enable it as well. So we're a few years away from it properly being fully embedded. But every single business we're talking to is testing it. They are using it in different areas, and have loads of different projects on. Some more so in the operational side, and creative development are probably the key ones for marketing, but there's more and more building out. When it comes to the media, think of marketing as broader sense, but media, advertising, buying. AI has been part of media buying for 10 years plus already. There's no way any of the bidding networks would even work without a bit of machine learning as part of that infrastructure and bidability. So I don't think it's net new news really for the media side. There's ways to then speed up and make that more efficient with some new tooling that have come out, but I just don't think it's quite there yet, to be honest. There's interconnectivity between DSPs and media activation solutions, and thinking about fuzzy matching between solutions that you can use models to build those types of things. I don't personally think that's new news from my side. I've seen that for many years. But I do see that's where it's going to get better and smarter and faster, and maybe the decisioning and the decisioning models that sit behind it will become better. However, what we have to be really cautious about is that they're explainable models. And that's where legal, ICO, the EU AI guidelines come into play. It's going, how are those models explainable? Are we clear about what they're doing? What's the testing process of this as well versus others? And that's where I don't think we're quite there yet, because even if we could build the models, they're not as easily explainable or understandable. So therefore, we can't error check as easily. Or if there's complaints or the consumer wants to understand how certain things have been done, and obviously we can't do preferential pricing through models, it's just a no-no. So you then go, well, okay, how do we do that? So a lot of human plus AI. It's not AI replacing people and other things. I think there's way more exciting stuff to come. The media world, I haven't seen quite enough of it to make proper game-changing impacts. Creative, obviously, massively game-changing outputs. And I'll be intrigued to see where AI legal ends up. We always make sure from our side that we've got considered creative areas and dams, basically, to when you put with permissioned content. So you can't then use AI just to scrape the internet and build you assets, because who has permission to it? Who has the permissioned content to do that? So you've got to be very cautious about what you actually stick AI onto, and obviously make sure nothing's pushed out into the cloud. So nobody wants to be giving away their PII or business sensitive data, or even maybe non-business sensitive data. Clients and brands don't want that to become open sourced. So that's where I think AI also needs to improve around enterprise licensing and enterprise secured environments that can just sit within brand servers and their environments. And that's what we're either helping teams build and test today, and working with lots of different businesses around those kind of setups as well, around AI driven enhanced search on sites and making chatbots even better, but making sure it's only pointing at their web builds or their own content, permission content, and not pulling from open source. Because then it could be dangerous. You also don't know what the bot's going to start spitting out.
That's fascinating. I think the entire area clearly is going to continue to dominate the headlines for many years to come. I think one of the areas I'm particularly interested in as a kind of quote unquote content marketer is around the impact AI will have on content consumption. Meaning, will we see more people getting their news through ChatGPT style tools rather than directly from publishers, which obviously then has a subsequent impact on how that publisher monetizes their eyeballs. What are you seeing right now? What's kind of your thoughts on that dynamic and how that might change?
Oh my, yeah. I mean, it's scary and interesting at the same time, Ben. From my standpoint, whether everyone shares my thinking on that, I don't know. But I mean, truly, yeah, AI I think will be driving the news. There's I think it's unlikely it won't. It's how it gets controlled and manages the problem. But quite frankly, right now, if you use your Apple News app, which I do quite often actually, just see what's the top line stories. This is being artificially powered by preferences and biases already based on your viewing criteria. Facebook feeds, Instagram feeds, obviously Meta infrastructure, TikTok, all of this is being fed by next best decisioning, preference understanding, engagement, clicks, likes. That's the same thing about news. It's about articles, it's about referrals, it's about affiliate tracking. So AI will help power that, but it will also power your biases and it will also power preferences. So unless there's some EU AI regulation, which or some other UK regulation to try and stop or enhance and fuel some of that decisioning, it's we will continuously see this. Now, obviously, there is a level line on how much do you get the biases within that and the explainable biases. So that potentially will change, and I think that's going to be a core area of focus over the coming years. But no matter what, AI will still be part of this to fuel what works, what doesn't work, what should we be reading, what shouldn't we be reading. And that's dangerous, I think, in my mind, and a little bit scary, but it's I can't see it majorly changing at this moment in time. Now, whether, and I think getting to your question, Ben, which correct me if I'm wrong, but will people be going to ChatGPT directly for their news? I don't know, to be honest. I potentially, but actually, I'd probably put more of my money on sticking with the existing bigger solutions like Meta, Microsoft, Apple, Amazon, who are spending significant money in their area or acquiring businesses within this area, like OpenAI, obviously. I just think AI and those solutions will just be embedded into their platforms, and it will just become a seamless output. Maybe in say 5 years' time, we won't really be talking about AI in this instance. It should just be a capability that's embedded into BAU, business as usual outputs, and you just wouldn't know. It's just going to be AI as part of it, and it's just seamless. And we still go to the news where we'd normally get it from. We still get it from Google. Google is already, and I don't know if you've seen it yourself, but it's already got AI to summarize search capabilities, and will also auto summarize your news if you're typing a few keywords. So it's already there. I just think it's going to live within the platforms we already have today. So I don't think it's going to necessarily create new platforms. I could be terribly wrong here, but I would still bank on those existing platforms to be the drivers of it. But yeah, AI fueling that content consumption based on the monetary setup and how eyeballs are tracked, and it's going to be fundamentally within there. It's then just how much it gets managed and how much the bias gets fed into it, and if that gets legally, and I think that's the only reason why it will change, if there's legal consequences or legal enforcement to then say you cannot push certain agendas, you cannot push certain outputs and other areas within it. That's the only reason why I think that might not happen. Otherwise, if you let the AI algorithm do it, they're going to be pushing more content to people that what they want, because that will drive better clicks, better engagement, better view-through rates, which drives better marketing, advertising, monetization of similar and like-minded content.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and there's clearly a lot to be talked about from an AI perspective. Obviously, as I say, it dominates a lot of our events. The other topic that we've obviously touched on already that dominates a lot of events and panels is cookies and third-party cookies, especially with recent announcements.
Yes.
Let's assume we move past cookies one way or another. The consumer kind of makes that final decision and we deprecate cookies that way, or wherever it ends up happening. What do you think is the next topic that's going to dominate every panel, every event? What's that next big thing?
What's my predictive capabilities as an analyst here? And I love that. I tell you what, the next 6 to 12 months will be an interesting one around, obviously, browsers. That's building on the cookiness setup, is going, what does that mean? If I need to give permission at a browser level, does that mean I need to change all my cookie pop-ups on our website, or do I need to collect data in a different way? Personally, I don't think it changes what we talked about earlier around the data value exchange and the cookie and the customer data capture. I still think that is fundamental. It's needed. It's the right thing to do. And by having that, you can then enrich it in fair and equal ways, like using your tool with InfoSum, as well as other providers in the market. Now, if we then think, and I think that will be a big topic over the next 6 to 12 months, what does that mean for attribution and media attribution again? Because that was always the headache, and why it hasn't really worked out for Google, to be honest. It's going, couldn't quite get GA4 powered up enough, and they didn't have a good, and how did attribution really work? And I think that's what everyone's been racking their brains about for the last few years. So it gives a bit of respite. But anyway, what it means is you need a multi-mix of measurement. And now you've got a bit more time to set that up in a better way now. So I still think those topics will continue, the measurement, the attribution versus multi-mix measurement versus what does now browser cookie setup and permissions mean? Does that mean we'll be able to track less if you opt out, a bit like with Safari, because that's kind of their process. So does that cause a trouble? But I actually, and sadly, probably doesn't give you anything net new here, Ben, but I'm just thinking, building on the AI fuel and knowing that I'm pretty sure that this is where it's going, and it already has started, is a build up in AI ethics and AI legislation. I think those two things, which are already scaling now, but being that we've not quite got to executional output for marketing just yet, the next 2 years, that is going to become bigger. So if you're going to build up in an area, that's going to be it. And also it's going to be about building up that trust and legal understanding. I've had the experience over my years trying to explain DMPs, data management platforms, to legal experts. And you go, oh my God, they're not simple to explain. And now we've got to get legal to understand it, who are non-technical and non-data-driven marketers. So now we're going to have to explain how AI works and how that modeling works. It's going to be another net new challenge. So, and I know businesses are already going through this, but talking about the ethics then involved, the legislation and the changing legislation, I think that's really where some of those growing topics are going to be. Some of it could be quite dry material because it's just fundamental legal legislation. But other bits are going to be super interesting in my mind. And I mean, to be honest, I love the legislation as well. It gives you clear caveats. But it's going to be finding what are the grey areas. But also then, but what's the ethics? What is right? What should we be doing? And some of the things talking about, just like you'd think about, for instance, the ethics of in creative and using AI for creative. Should you be using AI to create humanoid individuals to represent clothing, fashion, makeup? And if so, should you then be making sure you are making it very clear that this is AI generated? Because you can make artificially independent diversity, sizes, which could be completely fictitious. It's not right. So there's a good thing there. And I think at the moment, brands are ahead of legislation. Brands are doing actually quite the right thing, going, no, we've used AI for this, and actually we want to be really clear to our audience and stepping in front of it, but testing it as well, which is great. But you then go, but then I think we're going to get down, give it a year or so, you're going to go, well, okay, but what is right? What should we be doing? Just like you say, an influencer ad, that wasn't use. You have to now say that's an influencer advertised piece of work. This is an AI generated piece of work as well. We need to be saying that. But it's then going, well, what should it and where should it and shouldn't it be used? And what does that mean to the workforce as well? So I think there's some interesting areas there. I think that's what I managed to come up with as probably the critical areas of conversation.
Yeah, I agree. I think definitely going to be what dominates the headlines. And I mean, we've covered a lot during this conversation. It's been fascinating. I've really enjoyed kind of digging into your brain really on kind of the current state of the industry and how you really take a really people first approach, which I really love. Is there anything we haven't touched on that you think we should touch on before we wrap things up?
Oh my God, plenty, Ben. I suppose the only thing I would do, if you allow me, is a little plug. Is from one podcast to another. You've got your identity architects, which I absolutely love, and please look out for me as a shameless plug for my You Had Me at Data podcast as well, which we talk about data, tech, and insight, and talk about unleashing connected relevant experiences and unlocking understanding. That's the only other thing I can throw in there, Ben. I mean, there's so much great stuff we could chat about, but that's been brilliant.
Yeah, I love that. We'll include a link to the podcast in the show notes so that everyone can go and check it out as well.
Good,
obviously, what this podcast is about is getting really to speak to people like you who are pioneering new, better ways to use data to deliver those better customer experiences we've touched on a lot. So when you look at people that you admire within the industry, who would you nominate for me to interview in an upcoming episode?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many. I get to work with so many different brands and people. I could pick loads from my own team, which I would love to do as well. But I was just thinking who inspires me, and slightly different one. We're working on a project with some brilliant clients over at Which. The review business works in B2B and B2C. But there's two guys there that are driving a data-driven transformation. And what inspires me is that they knew there was a challenge, weren't 100% sure how to go about it and do the business case, but they're just doubling down and getting excited and driving this in the right state at pace, a customer data platform infrastructure, trying to do the right thing for customer and customer experience, but driven from data and technology. And two guys, we've got Neil Caldicott and Sean Connolly, Director of Marketing, CMO over there, and Sean Connolly, Head of Analytics. The two of them, and many, many other team members as well, with engineering and production and creative and everyone involved. But they just inspire me, firstly because they're absolutely amazing, brilliant guys, but also just because they're going, right, we've got a challenge, we need some help, and we want to go on this journey. We know it's the right thing to do for our customers. How do we go about it? What do we do? What works within feasibility for us? And how do we just start to edge forward and become, much more supercharged on the experiential kind and innovation kind of pipeline? How do we take those incremental steps to get there? And I just think those guys are fantastic, and they've just done a brilliant job of just trying to be inspirational, of trying to do the right thing and back it and learn on the journey as well, which I think everyone can do that. If anyone can do that, you don't have to be the subject matter expert. It's about learning and having the passion to do the right thing or drive customer experience, and then just asking the right questions, which they're great at.
Yeah, I love that. We'll definitely reach out to them and try and get them on the podcast. That's great recommendations. Rob, thank you so much for being on the podcast. As I say, I found this a really fascinating conversation. We've covered a lot of ground, but kind of what I'm left with is this real sense of the consumer first, people first approach that you take, focusing on business outcomes, focusing on people first. So I really appreciate that. And yeah, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Oh, brilliant. Appreciate it, Ben. It's been really good fun. Thanks, mate.
Thanks again to Rob for joining us on the podcast. It was a fascinating conversation and it went in so many different directions. But what I was left with as a key takeaway was the 4 pillars of effectiveness: people, process, a focused vision, and the right tools to enable it. All that leaves for me to do is to remind you to hit that subscribe button so you'll know when the next episode of Identity Architects lands. But until then, thanks for listening.